Another 3 a.m. Coney. And this one, we've got a special guest. Matt not here with the Reds game on in the background. I'm so sorry if I keep peeking over. But we have Russ Heltman, who's a reporter, a writer for All Bengals for Sports Illustrated, working with James Rapien, that great new project they're doing. Russ, before we even start this show, tell the audience what they should follow, where they should follow to get all the best Bengals news from you guys.
Yes, so it's a new venture from Sports Illustrated. They're going to try to hone in on more team-centric types of reporting, some more platforms in which, for example, All Bengals, it's fully Bengals. It's headed up by James Rapien, the lead team reporter, as well as some writers, including myself, Nicole Zimbro, and Blake Jewell. I think that's the team we have cooked up right now. And joined about 2 months ago and just been writing a few articles a week, just diving into some of the numbers, the ins and outs of the offseason, what we can expect from the Bengals going forward, how Joe Burrow can develop this year, some expectations for his rookie performances, as well as will A.J. Green be able to continue to play at an elite level as a healthy player. We know he's always been that at that top 5 range when he's been able to stay on the field consistently. So there's stuff like that. And also hoping to dive into some more multimedia stuff as we get the season going and growing everything on Twitter. You can check us out at All Bengals. Follow me at Russ Heltman 11, and you can add me on Facebook. Hit the follow button. I don't know if we're going to be adding.
I don't know.
Sending friend requests. I don't know. We can get some.
Just have friends out there. I have so many friends on Facebook.
Shoot me the request. If you shoot me the request, you send me a nice little note. Maybe I'll accept it. But yes, follow the All Bengals, all that stuff, and I hope to be a frequent contributor to the 3 a.m. Coney. I love this idea that you got cooking here, Lucas, and it's going to be a lot of fun to chop it up today.
Yeah, it's been a pretty awesome first 2 weeks. Now we're going to start adding in guests, hopefully a few more shows a week with the guests. I imagine Matt and I will be releasing an episode together a little later this week. But, yeah, we're ready to get rolling. You mentioned something a little earlier about A.J. Green and the cliff. And this brings me to the first topic of conversation. You and I were just talking about it before we got on here, and that is the potential comparisons from Andrew Luck to Joe Burrow. Now, Andrew Luck, number 1 overall pick. No doubt number 1 overall pick. Joe Burrow the same. I wouldn't blame Andrew Luck for his not success in college because Joe Burrow was at LSU, Andrew Luck at Stanford. But both fantastic college quarterbacks, highly touted, smart, leaders of an offense. And we remember that rookie year, Andrew Luck went 11-5. The year before, Russ, those Colts were 2-14. Sound familiar? I think it does. Bengals were 2-14. That Colts team was 0-7. 0-7 in one-score games. 0-7. What were the Bengals this year, Russ?
0-8.
0-8.
One victory. Half the season, Lucas. It was so painful. Half the season, we were living right down to the wire and despair every single Sunday.
0-8. So it was just not great at all in terms of one-score games. And what Andrew Luck does the next year with an awful Colts team, 28th in offense, 28th in defense, horrible offensive line, remained horrible throughout Andrew's time in Indianapolis, is he had 23 touchdowns, 18 picks. I don't know. That's something that I could maybe see from Joe Burrow. Almost too many interceptions in my mind. But sure, 18 picks. He's trying to make something happen with a bad team. He goes 9-1, Andrew Luck does, in one-score games. 9-1, 7-game winning drives. And the Colts go 11-5 with not a very good team, finish second in that division, and lose in the first round of the playoffs. To me, that's something that seems possible for Joe Burrow because a very similar point between that Colts team and this Bengals team is an aging wide receiver. That team was Reggie Wayne. This team, it's A.J. Green. A.J. Green even younger than Reggie Wayne was at the time. Reggie Wayne was 34 back in 2012. I think this has a lot of similar formulas to Andrew Luck in 2012, although a tougher division. But I think success is certainly in the cards for Joe Burrow, no matter the complications due to COVID-19.
I'm right there with you, Lucas. And to me, I love the demeanor and the mentality that Joe Burrow has shown, especially in his first availability with the media this past week, where he's saying it's just another job. It's just another season. There's no excuses, essentially, from Joe Burrow. And that's how I'm kind of approaching it as a guy looking at this team where, yes, there's a lot of new faces, but there's new faces on teams across the NFL. There's people that haven't been able – nobody's had minicamp across the NFL. Nobody's had real meetings at all up until this past week when everyone's begun reporting. So there really is no excuses because everybody's on the same playing field. It's about how you approach it with that said mentality. And bringing up Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis Colts, I think that is the ceiling for this team this year. Is that kind of regression to the mean in terms of playing much better in tight games, learning from the mistakes that they committed last year in those instances, bringing back a lot of guys that I think they trust and they believe are leaders on this team. I think there's a lot of young players ready to make a step and ready to take a big leap forward. The addition of DJ Reader, I think, is the most underrated aspect of this team this offseason. He's the guy that I could really see vaulting into that top 5 echelon of defensive tackles and the likes of Fletcher Cox, Aaron Donald, those players that, yes, they play a position that isn't very glitzy and glammy, but we know their names and we know the impact they have on the game. And I think DJ Reader is going to bring that. And on the defensive side of the ball, and Joe Burrow and the connection with AJ Green, I think is going to be so crucial, as it was with Andrew Luck and Reggie Wayne. Reggie Wayne that year, and I dove into the numbers for the AJ Green Cliff piece. You could check that out on my profile at allbengals.com. It was really maybe arguably his best year, you could say it is, of his career, definitely at least his second best year. And like you said, came at the age of 34, a point in the wide receiver's career where you almost never hear of any players performing at that level. I saw one of the stats I used for that AJ Green piece from Fantasy Pros listed off that you have less than a 10% chance of becoming an elite wide receiver or putting up that type of number as a fantasy type of player after the age of 32. So that's something to watch for AJ Green. We can't expect him to be really elite at that high level, but I think top 15, top 20, at least top 25 type of receiver in the NFL, an upper echelon starting number 1 guy is definitely in the cards. And if they bring that to the table and DJ Reader has the impact that I think he can, then this team can definitely reach its ceiling. The question is, once again, will the issues with the offensive line and that not being really set at all going into the season, is that going to hamper it fully? I can't really remember, honestly, what the likes of the Colts offensive line look like going into
well,
that
I mean,
season.
Andrew Luck's retired now, so it wasn't very good.
Yeah, it was never any good. So it obviously, and some more difficult circumstances for that unit to come together, obviously with the pandemic and everything. But they're on the field today. They were out there getting reps in. The season has quote unquote started. They're going to work, and it's time for no excuses. They have to get out there, come together as a team, and it's really going to test the fortitude of this coaching staff. Can they get these guys ready together and ready to play?
Yeah, and you mentioned pressure in the offensive line, but to me, that's not really a worry with Joe Burrow, because I think the reason he was a perfect fit for the Bengals was he was the best quarterback under pressure in the history of college football, pretty much. And he's also the best quarterback under pressure in this draft. Tua was not very good under pressure. I mean, everybody talks about that freshman year he had, that game in the national championship. Do you know why that was such a long touchdown pass in overtime? Because Tua was so bad in the pocket, he got pushed back to midfield on that same drive. I don't think Tua is a surefire thing, especially with pressure, and I don't think he would have done well at all behind that Bengals offensive line, especially with his injuries. But Joe, we saw him play the national championship with a broken rib or bent cartilage or whatever he had after that hit early in the game against Clemson. He takes pressure, and as I've read from you, and I think I read last year, same exact pressure rate the Bengals offensive line gave up with Andy Dalton behind center as LSU gave up this year with Joe Burrow, and they won in the national championship, and Burrow was still that good and that dangerous. Those are the numbers that I think a lot of people are ignoring with this kid. The pressure rate, the ability under pressure, the movement in the pocket, the sharpness of his throws, the decision-making, and the accuracy. These are things that I would think that a lot of smart quarterback guys in the media would have caught on to, but there's just this absolute backlash against Joe Burrow, and it's hard not to think that it's because it's the Bengals. I feel like if he were in Miami right now, they'd be a popular pick to win the AFC East.
It has the Bengals stench all over it, obviously. And they've never – it's just been a thing throughout our entire lives, the last 20 years. They have never, ever, especially the national media, given the Bengals a whole lot of respect or a whole lot of airtime. But you're right, Lucas, and even more right actually than you were giving yourself credit for, because Andy Dalton, actually, people will be really surprised to hear this, was pressured at the lowest rate of any qualified starting quarterback last season at 22.6%. No quarterback was pressured at a lower rate than Andy Dalton. Now, this is all according to Football Outsiders. They do great work over there with their DVOA system. And I think it was 3 starts, correct, from Ryan Finley, for that gifted us with the beautiful blessing known as Joe Burrow now. Thank you, Ryan Finley. The pressure rate, Lucas, shot up to 38% under the tutelage of Ryan Finley. So I think some veteran smarts, some veteran savvy were definitely at play with Andy Dalton. And obviously he was more equipped to get the ball out faster and be able to evade some of that pressure before it even got there. And that's the thing I believe Joe Burrow will be able to do, because even at LSU, he faced a pressure rate of 31% under the quote unquote best offensive line in the country. That award to me was a little bit more of the media seeing, less than 10 sacks, was kept upright all year, great rushing attack, unbelievable passing game. Yeah, they're winning all the awards anyways. We'll give this offensive line award. But Lucas, there was no first round picks on that entire offensive line. That line was not chock full of talent.
Listen, I think what we're going to think about that LSU team in 10 years, in 10 years, we're going to turn around. We're going to look at the LSU team, the greatest football team in college football history. We're going to look back at that team and go, wow, Joe Burrow carried that? This isn't going to be a Miami Hurricane situation where you've got 22 guys and 18 of them made the Pro Bowl, and they were all incredible, and they won this national championship, and they had such a great recruiting base. LSU has had a bunch of NFL players for years. I think that there's going to be a lot of good careers. I think Jamar Chase is going to be a good player. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to make a Pro Bowl. I think that these guys are going to be good players. But I don't see a single other Hall of Famer on the offensive side of things for LSU. Maybe Christian Fulton or maybe Patrick Queen in the middle. Maybe somebody on the defensive side is better than I think they are. But offensively, no offensive lineman. Justin Jefferson, where'd he go? Jacksonville?
Minnesota.
He's with Minnesota? Okay. He might have some success there, but I don't think he's nearly as good as Stephon Diggs. I don't think he's an accurate replacement for that. I think in 10 years, Joe Burrow is going to have an MVP under his belt. I won't say Super Bowl, but let's just say playoff win. He's going to be super successful, and all those LSU guys aren't as good as we thought they were. I think that a great quarterback elevates every other position. The fact that I'm saying that, and it's a hot take, is crazy to me, because that's what we've thought for years. For years, they said, hey, LSU just needs a quarterback, a great quarterback. A great quarterback comes along, and everybody turns around and says, well, LSU is such a great team. Of course he won all those games. But they were going 9-3 with the same recruiting base and the same level of NFL talent every single year. Why did this happen? Why were there so many NFL players? Why is the question people should ask. And the only thing that makes sense, it's not Joe Brady, it's not Ed Orgeron, it's not anybody in that LSU campus or in the state of Louisiana except for the dude that wore number 9, Joe Burrow. And I expect the same type of elevation of talent in Cincinnati.
I heard TJ Houshmandzadeh put it pretty simply the other day, and it's pretty cut and dry. I've never heard a better summation than 20, 30 seconds that he spit it out was, yes, Ed Orgeron's a great motivator. He's a great recruiter. He's a solid football coach. Yes, Joe Brady brought a great system of offense to LSU that was really tailor-made to the skill set of Joe Burrow. But the bottom line is players have to go out there and execute the plays. They have to go out there and perform. Matt Flynn didn't go out there and perform at a monster level and win a Heisman Trophy for LSU. That had never happened before. The LSU quarterback was an absolute laughingstock. It was an afterthought. It was an Achilles heel. And Joe Burrow showed that he can not only elevate to that level and become the best quarterback in LSU history, but put up the best season of all time. And that's not just because he got a different system. That doesn't really equate. He had to go out there and execute. He had to go out there in the biggest moments and make the plays. And that's the bottom line. He went out there and did it. And every single chance that he had to fall on his face, he didn't. And that's the most amazing thing to me is the poise that he showed every single time stepping up in the pockets that weren't very clean. The poise he showed in the national championship game down early and things not going well for him. he has answered the bell every single time, so much so that it honestly just became boring. And the thing for me going into the season and why I am cautiously optimistic, but I teeter on this thing could be a disaster is, can he command the room enough, which I think he will be able to, but can he command the room enough in this current moment to say, hey guys, we got to be like on our P's and Q's here. We got to act like we are living in a nursing home, because if anybody gets this disease, it directly affects everybody else in the locker room's ability to go out and get wins. And that's, I think, not only with the football stuff, but the leadership aspect that he's going to bring is going to be really, really crucial this season, because everybody has to be really bought into, we are one team.
Yeah, well, I think that with Joe Burrow and anything COVID-19 related, I don't want him – you don't speak on stuff like that. You just simply do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the leadership you need. And then older guys and coaches are the ones that are the enforcers.
And I'm sure they already addressed that.
Yeah, listen.
And you know what, Lucas? You only need to say it once. That's it. You only need to say it once. Everybody should already understand what's going on here and what's at stake.
Exactly. And Joe Burrow is so much about winning that he's going to do whatever necessary to make sure they get as many wins as possible. Joe Burrow doesn't need to go out to a bar this year. He's not interested in it. Could not care less. I'm serious. He is
to that point, Lucas,
locked into football.
That's the thing for me is he didn't buy an apartment downtown on the banks or anything like that. I don't know exactly where the real estate is located, but he has purchased
East Side,
I'm assuming suburban home. So
I heard East Side of Cincinnati. We know why it's the East Side of Cincinnati. It's
East Side, baby.
It's the shortest drive to Athens.
PBS.
That's exactly.
That's right.
No, it's the shortest drive to Athens. Also the shortest drive to Paul Brown Stadium, I'm sure. But Athens, right? Home, family. All those things are so important to Joe Burrow. To rewind a little bit and a point you made about the new offense and how people think that, wow, Joe Brady came in and he had this light bulb moment. Oh, we're going to run this offense. And this Joe Burrow guy is perfect for it. I think I can teach him how to run that. That is not what happened at all. Joe Burrow looked at Orgeron in the eyes and said, if I come here to LSU, we need to run that offense I ran in high school, that they're running at Ohio State, that every other college football program seems to be running, or at least a variation of it. I need you to install that. Ed Orgeron said, we can't do it this year. We're too far down the road. But I promise you, Joe, we will next year. And that's exactly what happened. And Joe Burrow was a coach, essentially, for that offense. Watch LSU's plays, then go look up, Bengals fans, if you hadn't had a chance.
And look at the bowl game from 2018 as well. That's when
they opened it up.
During that month of practice, Lucas, obviously because it's a bowl game, nothing really on the line. It's just a number in a record book. They were able to install some of those concepts.
Yes.
And that's when Joe Burrow, he'll tell you, he said it on multiple interviews, the light went off after that game. He said, we can win the national championship. And what did they went and won the national championship.
They bought into him, and they bought into the system that he runs, right? Scat protection, a lot of it. Have him make the perfect decision every time. Because the thing about the Joe Burrow offense, the reason why people didn't think that thing would work in high school was because there's no way somebody can make that many good decisions in a row with almost no protection. And that's exactly what he does. Go watch an Athens game, Bengals fans, when he played at Athens High School. And then watch an LSU game from the national championship season. It's the same offense. And guess what offense they're going to be running at Paul Brown Stadium this year? That offense with some more pro concepts you'll need a little more protection in. Mm-hmm. But this is what Joe Burrow was born to run. This is the system he's been audibling in since he was 8 years old. I know the youth football coach, that's a fact. He was audibling when he was 8. And he was like, wait, you can't be audibling, man. You're 8 years old. No, man, I see the defense. And I think it's completely possible and totally within the realm of thought. And the reason I can't understand why anybody's considering this, that Joe Burrow's the smartest quarterback to come out since Andrew Luck and the smartest quarterback to play in the NFL since Peyton Manning. People are acting like.
And at 23 years old, the development is there. He is ready to step in to the starting quarterback role right now with all of the experience, life, football, education, all that stuff that he has gone through, especially over the past 2 to 3 years.
Well, and I think why is it impossible that he's as smart or smarter than Peyton Manning was with football? Peyton Manning, football family, Joe Burrow, football family. We thought that Dan Marino would have the greatest arm of all time. Along comes Aaron Rodgers. We thought Aaron Rodgers, no way anybody's going to throw a football like him. Oh, now that guy's going to get paid $500 million this year, right? People get better at things. So why is it out of the realm of possibility that this dude from Southeast Ohio, who just had the greatest season of all time in the SEC, isn't it somewhat possible that he's the smartest quarterback that's come out of the draft? That's totally within the realm of possibility. And, I hate to.
And there's no way to really know that or to quantify that until we get 10, 15
10
years
years
in with the stories and the X's and O's and all the film room sessions, all that stuff.
And I think that's exactly what's going to happen, because that's what happened with Peyton Manning. And I think this guy is going to be changing plays year one. And here's an advantage Joe Burrow had that Peyton Manning didn't. Joe Burrow has been watching Peyton Manning. Like, Peyton Manning invented like smart quarterback play almost. The come to the line, the dominate, the decision-making, the, hey, he doesn't have a great arm, but man, look at that. Perfection. 5 MVPs by being a guy that makes the right decisions. Joe Burrow got to watch that development. And Burrow's mentioned that he loves being compared to Peyton Manning. He's talked to Peyton Manning. If he's as smart as Peyton Manning, that's the X factor everybody's missing. And I believe he is. I believe he's one of the best football minds we've seen come out of the draft in a long, long time. And he's starting to look like he's in shape for that. I want to talk negative, though, with you, Russ, before we get out of here. Your article about
very glowing so far.
Well, last week we started with negative and then flipped to positive, so I figured I'd flip it today. But you wrote an article about who has the most pressure for the coaches, and to me, the most pressure to me is on Zach Taylor because he's the head coach, the head guy, gets it all. And I understand your arguments in the article, which I recommend everybody check it out, about the pandemic and all these things. It's difficult, not really much pressure. He won't get blamed for much. But Zach Taylor is the one thing to me that's a big, giant question mark. I understand the floor ceiling of the offensive line. I know the floor ceiling of Joe Burrow. I know the floor ceiling of about every other position group on this team. But the floor ceiling of what Zach Taylor is, to me, is absolutely wide open. I've seen moments that he seems to have it all together, that his ceiling is with a great quarterback, like a 1-2 Super Bowl Andy Reid type of guy, right? Just needed a great quarterback. He isn't going to be an all-time coach, but he's going to be a really good NFL coach. Sean Payton, right? One of those guys, maybe a Hall of Famer. I think that's really his ceiling. He's so young with a head coaching job. And the floor is an absolute disaster and an embarrassing hire that looked like it was just reactionary to Sean McVay getting a job. That's how wide the gap is between floor and ceiling for Zach Taylor. So for me, that's where the most pressure lies in Cincinnati, because they're not going to point fingers at the boy wonder, Joe Burrow, unless he looks absolutely horrible, which you and I know he probably won't. The fingers will be pointed for losing seasons and 4-12 and 3-13 right at Zach Taylor. And with Mike Brown spending this money, I don't think it'll take long for him to move on from Zach.
The biggest thing that I wanted to see last year, Lukas, from Zach Taylor was a willingness to, not lose the locker room, or the ability to not lose the locker room, which I think he checked that box.
Yeah.
There was multiple – it's not just about guys going out there and still trying. I want to hear guys say, we believe in Zach Taylor week in and week out. When you're – they were 0-9, up to 0-11 to start the season. When you're that deep into a losing streak and you still have guys bought in, that's a huge thing for me.
Well, they kept saying, just to jump on that point, they kept saying, we think that we're building something here. Like,
yes,
they believed
that's a great point. They didn't just buy in, they elevated and pumped up and said distinctly and definitively that they believe in what's going on. And the second point that I wanted to see Zach Taylor at least hit, because you and I were on WATH talking before the season, I think a couple weeks before training camp in 2019, saying this team ceiling is 6 wins, if that. So we did not have a lot of hope going into last year. So the second thing I wanted to see from Zach Taylor was a willingness to adapt. And I think he really showed that, especially on the offensive side, and just with how terrible the running game was in the first half of the season and what they did after the bye week. Games 1-8 for Joe Mixon in that zone scheme they were trying to run. He had right around 12.5 carries per game at 3 yards per attempt, minus 22% DVOA. And on games 8 through 16, when they switched the blocking scheme out of the zone attack and more to a pin pull scheme with the guards, went to 22 carries per game at 4.6 yards per attempt and a plus 11% DVOA. So his willingness to adapt, I think, is the biggest factor for success at any level of football, but especially the NFL. And another rookie head coach who showed this as well was Cliff Kingsbury with the Arizona Cardinals. We remember first couple of weeks of the season, they were running almost 50 to 60%, 10 personnel, and just going wide, 5 wide, having Kyler Murray try to sit back there and shred defenses. Well, that wasn't working because the defensive lines were just obliterating that offensive line and getting to Kyler. But they showed a willingness to adapt. They started running more 11 and 12 and getting the rushing attack going. That's a big reason why Kenyon Drake is still there in Arizona. And now they are set up this season in a very tough division. That being said, to really just have their second-year quarterback explode. They added another weapon in DeAndre Hopkins, and now they have the combo of coach and quarterback that have gained confidence through a little bit of an uneven first year, but are ready to take that confidence and push for the playoffs. And that's the trajectory that I think, as we kind of wrap this up here, all Bengals fans should be looking for is 5 to 6 wins, maybe 7 to 8 at the top. And if things go crazy, 9 to 10, but 5 to 6 wins, you look really solid. You build a foundation. The quarterback and the coach look to be on the same page and building rapport. And then you move on and have high expectations for 2021. But the biggest thing this year is making sure that Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor are building an offense that they can both be on the same page with.
Yeah, and I think Joe's an honest kid, and I think he likes his coaching staff because they believe in him. They've given him the keys. And every time somebody does that and attaches themselves to Joe Burrow and their good football mind, they've had success. Nathan White did it in Athens. He's the head coach there now. Ed Orgeron got, a 10-year deal or whatever he got, and Joe Brady got a job in the NFL. I think Zach Taylor lucked out. I think that he got the key to everlasting NFL.
And he knows it.
Legend.
Know he knows it. You know that Zach Taylor knows it. You know that his offensive coordinator, Brian Callahan, knows the only way he's getting any shot at being a head coach is if he can make Joe Burrow succeed. You know that Jim Turner knows the only way he's going to have an offensive line coaching job in the NFL past this season is if he can make sure Joe Burrow stays upright in his rookie year to a meaningfully permeable level with the actual talent of the offensive line. So all these coaches on the staff know that they are under pressure and that they are completely tied to the gravy train of Joe Burrow. And that's one of the big reasons why, as we entered training camps opening this week, why I wanted to do that story ranking the coaches and kind of just getting a temperature at who are the most important guys on this staff and who are really have their backs against the wall, so to say, to get something done. And I listed Al Golden 1 and Jim Turner number 2. I just really felt like with how much is going to be on the plate of Al Golden this year, I don't think he's going to be on the hot seat necessarily as first year linebackers coach. But Lukas, there's one starter that has legitimate big time game experience, and that's Josh Bynes. So there's a lot on Al Golden's plate. I think there's a lot of pressure on him to help be the catalyst for an improvement on defense. But we shall see what happens with that defense and Joe Burrow in the coming weeks, man. They got the shells on today. They were throwing routes. Didn't see any video. I don't think
I know. I need
cameras in there, but we got some still pictures. Unfortunately, no media members, I think, have been allowed at the stadium yet. They all have to watch from the bridges. But you know what? We're getting through it. We're adjusting, and I cannot wait for football to come back, Lukas. It was supposed to be the Hall of Fame game this week, and that got unfortunately canceled. But hopefully, fingers crossed, no more cancellations, and kick this thing off second week of September.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be pushed through, and I think it's going to be an interesting year. But a year like that will bond a team. I think that's another point, too. Mm-hmm. It bonds coaches. It bonds players. It's like a camp thing. You know, I've noticed this with the NBA bubble. I think there's a lot of guys that are going to get much better chemistry because it's like a camp. You're like out with the boys. You're at camp, right? You're locked together. This is us. We're all in this together. We're at a camp. You know,
and
it's like a
be
getaway.
Themselves there too. And I think that's something the players are going to be able to do this year is they're going to be hanging out more with each other because obviously with the pandemic, you don't want to be hanging out with people you don't really know. So maybe with that new house on the east side, there's going to be some Bengals only parties going down at the Burrow establishment.
Yeah, I think, listen, in a good leader, he'll say, listen, we need parties. Let's have one. My house, Bengals only, no plus ones. No
Yeah.
wives, nothing, no plus ones. Bengals only party. We'll distance it, keep it out of the media or whatever. Also, I'm very proud of Joe that he kept the T. Higgins and Auden Tate throwing sessions out of the media. That didn't leak out until training camp.
Or John Ross.
Or
A
John
couple weeks ago.
Ross, which I want you to comment on this. Will be the last thing before we get out of here. John Ross, to me, I have a feeling the Bengals are going to regret not having the ability to pick up his fifth-year option because he is the perfect receiver for a deep ball magnet and a guy who's really accurate and decisive on short routes like Joe Burrow. He's perfect for guys that can eat up the rack. We saw that at LSU, and John Ross is that. I think this is the perfect guy in a contract year for John Ross to be paired with.
If he stays healthy and things progress like I was saying with the Cardinals' trajectory last year, then unfortunately for us people that support the Bengals, cover the Bengals, John Ross will no longer be in stripes after this season because he's going to play his way into a contract with another team. And seeing as hopefully AJ Green stays healthy, I don't see them paying premier money to three different wide receivers, especially when they already drafted T. Higgins and they have Auden Tate as well. But I say that and I just think, man, there's nobody else. If they lose John Ross, there's not one other player on this roster that can do what he can do and have that pairing with a guy in Joe Burrow who him and Baker Mayfield are the two best deep ball throwers in the history of PFF college tracking. It's pretty cut and dry. Those two guys are the most accurate, the most prolific throwers of the deep pass. And last year, Lukas, take a guess at out of 22 passes, take a guess at how many deep balls out of 22 were catchable for John Ross.
Last year?
How many of them were even remotely catchable, even able to be in their vicinity?
Probably 9, and he probably scored 4 touchdowns on those 9.
10 out of 22 passes were catchable last year. And I don't know what the catchable percentage on Burrow's deep balls last year were, but I can tell you it was better than 50%. So
it's much higher.
The unlocking of John Ross might finally happen in what is the worst timing for the Cincinnati Bengals, because rightfully so, Lukas, I wouldn't have extended him. I don't think you can extend him or pick up that option simply because he just has not stayed healthy. He has not produced at a high level because he can't stay on the field.
Yeah. Maybe it'll be an interesting situation where, you dish Tyler Boyd to another team because John Ross pairs better and T. Higgins worked out, and maybe get a linebacker out of it and reallocate the money.
Mm-hmm.
Those are –
or AJ Green. AJ Green you could sign AJ to a 3-year deal, and I
or
don't
AJ
think
leaves.
Do that.
AJ could leave too. I mean, that's true. All possibilities. That would be a great problem to have, though, if John Ross is so productive that we're discussing his contract. That would mean good things for the Cincinnati Bengals. Well, you joining us today, Russ, was a good thing for the 3 a.m. Coney. Thank you so much for joining us. I was going to ask your floor ceiling for this team, but we'll save that for another time. We'll chew on training camp a little bit, see how the roster shakes out. But a lot of fun, man. Thanks for joining us.
Always welcome me on the show anytime, Lukas. I love doing it, man, and I love the project you guys got cooking up. I will support the 3 a.m. Coney whenever I can, and everybody check out All Bengals. Check me out at Russ Heltman 11. Shoot me a follow on Facebook, and I look forward to another venture on 3 a.m. Coney.